What's going on, New Canoe Nation? Welcome back to another Unlimited podcast. Tonight, we're going to be talking a little hunting from a kayak. It's going to be fun, man. Brad is a good friend of mine. He's taught me a lot, so we'll pick his brain a little bit. He's been hunting from a kayak and a canoe for a long time. He's got a lot of experience in the waterfowl, deer hunting, things like that. So we're going to be chatting about that a little bit. I already see James O'Neill in the chat. What's up, brother? Drop in the comments where you guys are tuning in from, what kind of kayak you're floating out of. And as always, as we go through the episode, if you guys have any questions, comments, things like that, drop them down there. We will get them answered for you. Whether it's, about a boat, a piece of gear, or something like that. I know you waterfowl hunters are getting excited. I know in Wisconsin, waterfowl season is opened already, Illinois as well. And the new mossy oak duck blinds have started shipping. I've seen a few pictures. I got mine myself. I'm excited to get out there. Dave Palmer in the house, tuning in from Canada. What's up, brother? So let's get the guest of the hour in the house, Mr. Brad Hurlebaus. What's up, my man?
What's going on, Mr. Brian?
Just living the dream, my friend. Doing my podcast job tonight.
That sounds all so familiar.
I know, man. Tim Jr. in the house. What's up, brother? Long time no talk, man. Rockford firefighter there. New canoe lover himself. I know that. But I know we had you on with Parker McDonald. We were talking some preseason hunting tactics, things like that. But, as we promised, we wanted to get you in for your own episode, talk about hunting out of a kayak. 'Tis the season, right? We got the new partnership with Mossy Oak. Super exciting. And, obviously you got quite a bit of experience in that. So just give us a little background on you, man, how you got into a kayak hunting and all that good stuff, man.
I took up waterfowl. I took up all hunting myself at late onset, early 20s. No one in my family hunted. I was renting a farmhouse at the time, and I had geese and ducks dropping into the back in this little flooded corner. I'm like, I got to figure this out. So, it started with that and just field hunting out of my backyard. And I went through a bunch of different boats over the years, from John boats to mud boats to small, like V-bottom boats. And there was something that always drew me to the simplicity of a canoe. And this was before the kayak boom. And I had a really good hunting friend at the time. So we took up canoe hunting, and we got into these places that boats just couldn't get into. We're launching from the sides of roads. We're pulling canoes over ditches. We're running these super tiny rivers that open up to these little, these swampy areas, which were just holding birds because they weren't getting any pressure. And there was just something peaceful about it. Like, no motor, you're not loud. You're just sneaking in to the swamp or sneaking in through the woods. And it's continued to draw me there. It's always held my attention. And as kayaks progressed and became better and more adaptive, that was just an easy progression as well into just adding another tool to the arsenal.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's super cool, man. I got to experience my first, kayak duck hunt with you last year. And it was something special, man. It was unique, I've always seen the John boat thing, obviously the mud boats, things like that. But there's something about being able to sneak into that back corner of the marsh that, some of those guys can't get to, and, tucking your boat back into the marsh grass and, watching those birds work decoys, things like that, man. It's definitely something special, man. And it's very addictive if you've never done it and you get into it. Cause I think after that first duck hunt I did with you, I was like, all right, what do I need? A few $100 later. Yeah.
Open up the checkbook. Here we go.
Exactly.
Ready, set, spend.
Exactly. So it's definitely cool, man. It's definitely a unique experience. If you're a hunter and you've never done it, man, it's unbelievable. And I totally get what you're saying. Small creeks, rivers, we got to experience that this past weekend. in southern Wisconsin, found a small creek where, we were able to walk in, sit on the bank, and just, middle of nowhere, and see those birds work, man.
Which, I mean, and those small creeks, I mean, there's other ways to duck hunt other than just decoying birds. Like you can jump shoot streams, which is a whole nother thing that is opened up by kayaks, especially if you're a solo hunter.
Sure.
I mean, that's really where the kayak shines. I mean, I still own a canoe. It has a place in my fleet. But when it's just me and I'm solo, or if the condition, or if I'm hunting really, really far back, like in a marsh, like not far back distance wise, but far back being like really, really low cover.
Sure.
When you add like the layout blinds to the new canoe, I mean, the gunnel is what, I don't know, 8 inches off the water, maybe
about that. Yeah.
So by the time you have that, you can hide in less than a foot of grass. Like you can't hide a big boat. You can't even hide a canoe in that. Like, but you can do these kayaks and you can paddle in solo, or you can run a motor, or is it Iowa paddle, or I have a mud motor on mine, depending on the distance I need to travel. You can just hide in these areas that a big boat can't. And I know this because I have a big boat as well. I have a mud boat. I mean, like, I have a mud boat that I'll mother ship my kayak with to use as a layout boat. I mean, it's another tool that even if you have a big John boat, you'd be surprised what a kayak can open up that you just can't do with your big boat.
Yeah, that's true, man. Like, my first experience with the whole mud boat thing was this year with yourself, and it was a super unique experience, but a lot different than a kayak. And exactly what you were talking about, like trying to hide that versus a kayak. Like it's so much easier with stashing that little kayak in somewhere.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're talking a footprint in my boat. I mean, well, it's got 20-inch sides, and then I'm running a banded axe blind, which is what, 3 feet tall in the front. So you're trying to hide something that's 4 feet tall. You need enough cover. Whereas with the kayaks, you don't need that much cover. And when Wisconsin, with the open water hunting laws, you have to be within 3 feet of vegetation that covers 50% of your boat, the height of the gunnel, blah, 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 blah. Well, with a kayak, that's simple. And in a kayak, you can hunt what would be illegal in a big boat because it doesn't have enough cover. So it can allow you to hunt areas that birds aren't used to seeing hunters, because you're way farther out from the shorelines. You're way farther out from those big islands, because you can hunt those areas in the middle of a swamp that have very low cover. And that's where the birds are going to feel protected. So it opens up a whole nother option for hunting.
Yeah, it's super cool, man. I dig it. Trying to pull up a picture of your boat rigged up with the mud motor and everything.
I got you covered. I'll take care of that. Here we go.
But,
we'll go with the snowy pick. This is a late season hunt.
It's cool because you can tuck in. You got the motor option. Like myself, I'm going to be running the EPS system here in a hot minute, and running that back into marshes after talking to Romel Labrador, aka the Wizard, last year. Last episode. sorry. I see questions popping up. I'll get to them in a second, but talking to him and hearing what other guys are doing, running those motors through thick lily pads, grass, stuff like that, like, and having no issues. I'm like, I told Romel, I'm like, you think it'll handle some like thick marsh grass? And he's like, no problems. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to hold you to this. So we'll find out. I'll have some media coming for you guys on that. Ron Stem in the chat says, looking forward to using my Unlimited this season. Good luck, brother. Nicholas Beltran, sup, fellas? Ron is also asking, any guys running with a dog on their Unlimited? And you've got some experience with running a dog.
I do, not on the Unlimited, but I have been using my Flint actually with my dog all summer.
Yeah.
My limited, I held off on purchasing the limited because I wanted the Mossy Oak edition, which I'm hoping, fingers crossed, I'll have it before the season ends. I'm really, really hoping supply chain issues affect us on the team just like they affect everyone else. I mean,
Sure.
we don't get any special privileges at the end of the day.
Right.
So I held off because I really wanted that limited edition Mossy Oak. So I can't respond to the unlimited, but I've been able to paddle with the Flint with my dog, and I wouldn't hesitate to take my dog out in the Flint with decoys. I'd use a light load. I wouldn't throw in all the decoys I would with the unlimited, just based off space, room, size, everything else. But I can't see how an unlimited wouldn't be far superior than the Flint.
Yeah.
So I would see absolutely, as long as your dog has, I mean, it all comes down to the training of the dog, right? And being a dog owner and training multiple dogs and taking dog training extremely seriously, if your dog isn't steady, you're going to have issues. I mean, is the Flint or is the Flint stable enough for me to pull my dog over the side? Like, we've done retriever training in open water and I can take my dog up and over the side, but that's not something you want to constantly deal with when you're paddling out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would really recommend like not waiting until the morning of a hunt to get your dog some experience in a kayak and steady in the kayak, so it's used to the swing of the boat and everything else. I mean, we always want to set our dogs up for success. So, but to answer the question, I don't see any reason there's no reason with hunting a dog in an unlimited. And that's why I went with the unlimited, because you get the more scupper holes. It's going to drain far superior when your wet dog's coming in and out every time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know a question that's popped up too is on the new Mossy Oak blinds, is there still the hatch in the back for the dog? And the answer on that is yes. It's still got that zippered hatch, so you could either throw decoys, your dog back there, etc. Dave Palmer chiming in, he says he's going to run his this week. He's going to go a couple times solo first, but his dog has been in the back of his F12 and awesome. I know a bunch of guys have ran dogs in F12s because we've been, pushing that for quite a while. There's Brad's dog in the Flint there.
Good old wired hair. Something about a beard, man. A wet beard. I don't know. I mean, I've had labs. I'm not a dog snob by any means, but I'm going to say it. Bearded dogs do it better.
Ooh, shots fired. Shots fired. Dave Palmer says, do you brush your blind with the synthetic grass like Schiller, or do you do it right with raffia grass? Wow. Shots fired there too, man.
Well, that's okay, because I don't know if you can see it, but the spoonbill here is from Blind Grass. This is one of their shirts. So that's going to answer the question right there.
Yeah. Synthetic grass, man.
I stumbled into that this year. I'm the one that told you about it. It's 100% a different animal than any other grass, mats, raffia, any of that I've ever used, because it doesn't hold water. And in a kayak, that is so crucial, because you don't want all that extra water weight after you've been paddling out. It's just more weight. It's more drag. It's wet. I mean, this synthetic grass has a 5-year warranty. I mean, there's no partnership with me in Blind Grass other than I have it on my kayaks. I have it on my big boat. It's just, I really don't know how to recommend it enough, to be honest, because it's just that much superior of a product. I mean, I've used so many different options over the years, replacing it every year as it dry rots, it molds, it starts to fall apart. This stuff's got a 5-year warranty.
Yeah, that's my blind there, half done. I'm going to get it done, I promise. But I have to agree, man. Like, it's, to describe it, it's almost like a plastic type of grass, but it looks like real grass, man. I was kind of blown away. It's not the cheapest thing, but after having a conversation about it, it's like that's the whole wet factor and holding water, like you're talking about, is a huge game changer, I think, in my opinion. And not only that, but like you and I have talked, like after a certain point in time, that grass kind of breaks down, whereas this stuff is virtually never going to break down. So it's I
want to throw that caveat out there. That's only a base layer. Like, that's only, like, once I get out there, I have a machete in my boat at all times. I'm chopping grass around me and I'm filling in with natural.
Yep.
I mean, because no matter what base layer you use, it's never going to match 100%. But the whole point of my base layer is to break up everything and then just throw some natural on top. So it cuts down on my brushing in time drastically.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I've seen the machete come out more than once. So it's kind of funny. But I'll drop a link down to that blind grass if anybody's interested in it. Check it out. They're based down in what is it?
Louisiana.
Louisiana. I was gonna
Louisiana.
say Alabama for a minute, but yeah, it's something unique, man. Something different, unique. The one thing I wanted to talk to you about, like, if you've never kayak hunted, or I know a lot of guys are getting into kayaks this year, whether it be fishing, hunting, no matter what it is, like. And I think we touched on this the last episode too, but what are some like good things to know, good things to have, what to expect and things like that, man?
You got to always plan to flip. I do, right? So my shotgun's in a waterproof case when I'm paddling out there and it's tethered to my kayak. You lose your gun. Not only is your hunt ruined, but
your day's ruined too.
Your day's ruined, your month's ruined. I don't want to replace my gun. That thing wasn't cheap. Nor do I want to dive to go get it.
Yeah.
So, floating case tethered to it. The decoys I keep in a bag. You don't have to. I just choose a bag. It makes things easier for me to manage cords. I don't have to worry about stuff getting tangled up. I run Texas rigs on everything I have. So I keep that in a bag just to keep the deck clean. I use a small blind bag to stay organized. My shotgun shells stay in a waterproof container.
Okay.
You can use small roll top dry bags. You can use little ammo cans. I prefer a roll top dry bag just off the fact that it's easier. It's less space. It's less fumbling around for me because I'm not opening a latch or anything like that. You can also shove other stuff in there too because it's a roll top dry bag. You can shove your wallet, your keys, your phone, that type of stuff in there. So keeping my shells dry, huge priority. Making sure everything I paddle out there with, it makes it out there, right?
Yep.
Have a good PFD and wear it. I don't take mine off the entire time I hunt. I'm running an Astro Ronnie and camo. They unfortunately don't make it anymore, but the padding in that doesn't get in my way to shoulder my gun. So
that's a roll top bag there, just for folks that are interested in what that may be or don't know. So it's just basically a plastic bag that rolls, clips, keeps your shells dry. Sorry, man, I didn't mean to cut you off.
You're all good. I'm lost my train of thought here. I feel it's like it's a Monday or something.
Yeah. So floating case.
Life jacket. Make sure you get one that's not going to affect the shouldering of your shotgun. Because you don't want to have to take it off. That's not what you want to have to do. Because once you take your life jacket off, now you run the risk when you're in your boat, you're not going to put your life jacket back on when you go out to grab those ducks that you just shot, right? So now you're paddling out there and you're not wearing a life jacket in weather conditions that are less than ideal for paddling, for kayaking.
Yeah.
We're talking cold water. We're talking snow, rain, sleet, ice, everything out there. And hypothermia is a legitimate concern. Sure.
Absolutely. Unless you got the weather like we got now, which has been pretty insane.
I'll take my snow any day.
Any type of cold weather paddling, whether it's fishing, hunting, or just wreck paddling, man, it's something you got to take serious because that hypothermia can set in quick depending on the temps and the water temperature. Ryan Flink is chiming in. He says, "What's the trick with paddling in? Does type of paddle matter, or do I need to come to terms with getting a little wet?"
You're just going to need to come to terms with getting a little wet, especially when we're paddling through marshes. You've got the lily pads, you've got the grass, you've got the duckweed on top, and all that sticks to your paddle, and it just makes for a wet paddle because it's not clean water.
Sure.
For a paddle, for fishing, I love a lightweight carbon paddle, but when it comes to duck hunting, I want a fiberglass paddle. I want something heavy duty because I use it like a push pole when I'm out there. I don't buy an expensive paddle either. I think fiberglass, aluminum, something heavy duty that's not that expensive. So if you break it, you're not going to cry about it on your whole way home. Because again, my paddle is a huge tool when I'm out there. I'm using it to to push myself off through mud. I'm using it to help pull myself back on top of cattails, because I'll stick the paddle and I'll actually heave myself up like a rowing machine almost.
Sure. Well, not only that too, like I see a lot of guys and gals out there that aren't using the proper length shaft of paddle. Obviously, New Canoe, we're known for our stability, which means wider boats. So, I typically use motors, and, I've always had this 250 cm, carbon Werner paddle. Not ideal for paddling in unlimited. Pursuit wasn't too bad, but unlimited, I was like, it's just not going to work, man. Like, you always have those situations where you're going to have to paddle the kayak.
Absolutely.
So I did exactly what you're talking about. I got the New Canoe fiberglass paddle. It's relatively light. It's definitely not as light as my carbon paddle, obviously, but it's rigid enough for those situations you're talking about. Like, a lot of times you're, heaving yourself into the marsh grass, doing the push pull thing. I mean, I like to do the push pull thing when I'm fishing too.
Right.
Stand up, grab the one end of the paddle, kind of push me around, or do like the whole gondola thing.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes I act like I'm singing French or Italian or whatever it is, But I think that's ideal too, because if your shaft is too short, now your blade is closer to you, and as you're doing those paddle strokes, all that water's coming right on top of you. So in an unlimited, you want, like, depending on your height and things like that, you want at least a 260 to 280 centimeter paddle, which that New Canoe fiberglass paddle is adjustable to those lengths. And it's relatively affordable compared to like a carbon shaft paddle. So something definitely to consider as well.
Yeah, a good paddle makes all the difference when you're paddling in. And it's kind of a catch-22, because I would love to run a super lightweight, ultra expensive 280 centimeter paddle, but I don't want to trash it either. And duck hunting is rough on equipment.
Yeah.
I'm really meticulous with my equipment. Like, I dry it out after hunting. Like, I keep all my stuff very clean, very organized. I'm almost to the point where I'm probably a little OCD about it, to be honest. But it is hard on equipment. I mean, it's cold weather. It's wet, obviously, because you're paddling, but I mean, it's mud, it's dirt, it's grime. It's pushing through like just solid weed flats and everything else. So I would rather take a heavier paddle that's going to be more durable, even if it is more physically straining to paddle out there.
Right on. Ryan's also got another great question. He says, late season hunts when the marshes skim ice in the morning, is that the season's end for a kayak?
I've broken ice paddling in a kayak, and it is terrible. I mean, you can do it, but you're punching holes. You're getting very weird paddle strokes. But now if you run a mud motor and it's skim ice, no, season's still 100% game on, because you're not having to paddle through it. I mean, my Pursuit broke ice without a problem with a mud motor.
Sure.
Now, would I try to break an inch of ice? No. But
No.
when it's just skim ice that really would be hard to paddle through, having a motor in the back changes all of it.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, at that point, I think that late season hunt we did the last weekend, which was like the first weekend in December, it was super cold. And instead of wearing waders, I wore a dry suit bib instead of waders, just so that way, if I were to fall in, water's not going to get down on my legs and things like that. Should have been wearing a dry jacket, but
I wore my dry suit on that hunt and put camo over the top of it.
Yep.
That was cold enough to where the safety concern got real. Like, even in early season, we're still talking temperatures. We're still talking under the rule of 120, right?
Yeah.
Even in normal season.
Right.
So, but I don't break out my dry suit till it really starts to get to be a serious issue, or if I'm out in really, really big water where a chance of getting to shore isn't a quick opportunity, right?
Sure.
But even when wearing waders and a life jacket and some sort of top, I always wear a wading belt. Always.
Yeah.
I mean, wading belt with waders don't sink in water. That's not really what they do. But if you put that wading belt on there, I mean, it's going to keep that water from piling in you, which is going to be a hypothermia issue more than it's going to be dragging you to the bottom issue.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that's just it, right? Like, when you get to that late season, you have more of that risk. And you just got to play it right. And like you said, you were wearing a dry suit. You can throw camo over that. You're going to hunt the same exact way, but you're being a little safer and a little more cautious. I think that's the biggest thing is you got to, you know, cold water and cold air temperatures are nothing to play around with. It's a matter of you going home to your family at the end of the day. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So you definitely got to be cautious with it. Do research. I mean, there's a ton of great companies out there that make those dry suits and things like that. NRS, Mustang Survival Gear. There's a bunch of others out there. But, definitely if you're going to be doing those late season hunts, invest in a good dry suit or a good dry bib and jacket. If you're going to be wearing waders, like Brad said, definitely a wading belt. So that way, if you do fall in, that water's not getting down, filling up your legs and, weighing you down in the water. Because, as soon as you get in that cold water, if you've never jumped in cold water, everything slows down really quick
Oh
and
yeah,
your body doesn't want to function. So
it is an extremely dangerous situation. And there's other a dry suit is an expensive investment. I understand that.
sure.
But it's the best rain gear I own. Like
Yeah.
when it's end of November and I'm out there duck hunting and you have that cold sleeting rain,
Yeah.
it's a dry suit.
Yeah.
Like you throw you got a good base layer underneath and then you throw a decent hunting jacket on top. Even if that does start to get wet, you're going to stay dry.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is huge. Good questions, Ryan. I appreciate them, man. I appreciate them. Man, just jumping in.
I know, right into it.
I love it.
I know we touched base on like we were talking about things I bring with, right?
Yeah.
And I know we touched base on it, but a machete's huge. And I know people probably don't think about that, but when you're out there grassing your stuff in, and I made this mistake numerous times, just not when you grab reeds or cattails and you go to pull them, those things are razor blade sharp at times, especially if you pull it wrong, and you can easily slice your finger.
It's like paper cuts.
Yeah, but they're deep and they bleed. So it's just buy a cheap machete, chop it instead of pull. And that brings me to my next thing. I always have a small first aid kit in my blind bag. It's got a handful of Band-Aids. It's got some tape in it. I think I have electrical tape in it because electrical tape and gauze works better than regular medical tape, in my opinion. But that's from being years of a mechanic. But a small first aid kit's in my blind bag always. That's to me, it's just part of hunting is having I mean, you don't want some stupid little cut that's constantly getting wet and just keeps bleeding because it doesn't have a chance to clot.
Yeah, I always got one with me, whether I'm fishing or hunting or kayak hunting, kayak fishing, you just never know. I'm wilderness first aid trained too. So it's one of those things, man. It's just the nature of me. Since I got that, I'm like, I just need to have this on me at all times,
Oh, absolutely.
Whether you're hiking in the woods or, out there, you never know what could happen. It's just a good thing to have regardless. Or if you see somebody else in distress and, need some help,
I agree. My first aid kit changes quite drastically when we are, when I'm solo upland hunting, especially in northern Wisconsin. I do a lot of upland hunting and I do utilize the kayak for that as well. And we'll probably touch base on that in a little bit, but I'm going to stick to the first aid before I totally get sidetracked. Like my first aid kit completely changes because at that point I need to be able to self-rescue.
Sure.
So, I mean, we're talking quick clot, we're talking compression bandage, we're talking a tourniquet, because I'm not so worried about shooting myself, but there's a possibility that I could slip, fall, and have a tree branch puncture my leg. That's my bigger concern.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not being attacked by a bear. I've seen bears. It's not being attacked by wolves. I've seen wolves. None of that. I mean, my greatest concern is falling. And I also keep a splint. I also keep a small splint in my upland vest too, for all those same reasons. Because a lot of areas I hunt, the cell phone service is spotty at best.
Sure. Ryan Flink, man, I love this. Keep them coming, bro. Where do you position the kayak on a smaller decoy spread? Centered to the landing zone or offset?
I'm a right-handed shooter. So I prefer my kayak. So if we say the landing zone is 12 o'clock, right? I prefer my kayak around 7 o'clock facing, let's say 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock. I'm out that way there being a right-handed shooter, because it's real hard to turn this way, right? It's real hard for me to turn to my right. But if I'm sitting this way and the landing hole is here, I have full swing over that entire marsh knot. So when I set up so my kayak is probably around the 6 o'clock, or around the 7 o'clock position, with the main landing hole being around the 12 o'clock, but the bow of my boat is facing more like 1:30 or 2.
And where are you putting the decoys?
Decoys,
like 1:30 or 2?
Decoys, I'm going to leave that hole to land, and the decoys are going to be depending on the wind. Like, so normally I'd want the wind so the birds are landing into me, and depending on the setup, I might have the decoys around 10 or 11 as like a hook coming out to draw them in with a small pocket there around. Or I might do some sort of V shape if there isn't a lot of wind, or like an X. I mean, it really depends on the wind. And if we're talking a really small spread, I might not be that particular at all. If I'm only throwing a dozen decoys in this tiny little pothole, I might throw 3 over here, 4 over here, 5 there, and just leave a hole for them to land it.
Okay. Right in your swing zone.
Right.
I like it.
But the key though, which I think a lot of people want to like have that kayak facing directly to where they want those birds land. If you're a left-handed shooter or a right-handed shooter, it doesn't matter. If you're left-handed, you can't swing to your left. Right-handed people can't swing to the right. So you want to position your boat at an angle, giving you the maximum opportunity to be able to swing. And in the Flint, in an F12, in my Pursuit, you don't have to worry about, like, I know people always question, like, well, can you actually shoot in a kayak without flipping over? It ain't going to happen. Yeah. You're not flipping your kayak over from a shotgun. I mean, physics just says it's not going to happen to begin with, right?
We're not shooting a 50 cal here, folks.
Right, exactly. So you don't have to worry about the boat being sideways to your boat and the boat flipping. It's not going to happen, sure. especially if you're open water hunting. But now we're talking about we're being up in reeds, cattails, marsh on some sort of slightly more stable ground on top of that, giving you more stability.
Sure. No, it makes sense. I understand now why you position me in certain spots, pointing away from that hole where my swing isn't so open, but you have a better chance at shooting birds.
Yeah,
it makes sense now. No, I'm kidding. I'm all jokes aside. It totally makes sense, and I question you sometimes when I get out and hunt with you as well. On why you set up decoys the way you do, and why you leave those holes and stuff. So it's cool, man. That's great info. Ryan, great question. Thanks for chiming in, man. If you got more, drop them in the chat. Anybody else watching, if you guys got any questions, feel free to ask away.
I mean, I have done the exact drastic opposite than a small decoy spread. I have done an insanely large decoy spread in a very small pocket of water. To the point where it basically gives a bird, like, the birds have to struggle to find a place to land. And when you have enough birds around in a good migration, it's a completely different tactic, because it makes it look like a giant roost, kind of, or makes it look like a big raft of birds. But if the birds have to hover to figure out where to find open water to land, it drastically increases the time you have for shooting opportunities.
Sure.
Because they're not slamming down. They're making multiple passes. They start to hover more, and it's not always the right tactic, but sometimes when the conditions are right, it is an amazing tactic.
Nice. I like it. Well, you mentioned upland, man. So do you got any other waterfowl tips, things like that you want to throw out there before we move into how you're utilizing the kayak to upland hunt a little?
Scouting never ends. That's my first tip. Don't stop chasing the birds because the season's on. Always chase the birds, always scout, find where they want to be, hunt there. If you set up in the morning and you find out where the bird, especially if you have a kayak spread where we're talking 2-3 dozen decoys, it doesn't take long to pull the spread. If you're up and the first 30 or 40 minutes go by and they're not working your decoys, and you experienced this with me, if they're not working your decoys and you see where they want to be, cut bait, pull, move, go where they want to be. Don't be afraid to change during the middle of the hunt. Don't be stubborn. Don't be like, I can call better. These decoys are better. They're not, because they want to be where they want to be sometimes. And if you can see where that is, and if you can move there quickly and efficiently, get there, set back up. Even if birds are blown while you're doing that, they're going to come back.
Yep. Yeah. I saw that firsthand. I think that was the first kayak hunt, right?
That was your
I did
first
with you.
kayak hunt. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, man, we just set all this stuff up. What are these guys talking about? I'm like, come on now. And sure enough, man, moved maybe 80 yards away and into a little back pocket. And, it made a whole world of difference. Dave Palmer's asking, what is your typical spread? How many floaters, any robos, jerk rig?
My typical kayak bag is about 18 mallards. Let's change that. It's about 2 dozen ducks, 18 mallards, and then maybe some teal or some pintail or coots. Don't forget coots. Coots can be a pretty amazing little confidence decoy. And then like 4 or 6 goose floaters. That's my standard spread. If I feel like it's going to be more ducks than geese, I'll kick out the goose floaters and maybe do more mallards or more teal. If I feel like it's going to be a goose spread, I'll bring a dozen goose decoys with and maybe half a dozen or a dozen. I mean, it depends on, you're limited by space, and goose decoys take up a lot of room. The nice thing is with running that mud motor is, I mean, I can just pile bags on that thing and put my way out there and I don't need to leave myself room to paddle. I just need to leave myself room to position the motor. Right.
Sure.
So, but I'm typically kayak hunting in smaller areas, smaller water. So it's very rare I'm over 2 dozen decoys. A lot of times I'm 14, 12, 16, like 13. I think my standard, one of my bags is a dozen mallards, 3 mallard duck butts, 6 green wing teal for a little bit of a different for a little bit different confidence and size. And I'll run those all year long, even if teal aren't here. And that's my small water bag. That's very easy. It's quick, especially when I'm solo hunting. Picking up decoys at the end of the hunt is a pain. It always is. Especially if you're in higher winds and you can't walk out there, because a lot of the marshes I hunt with my kayak just seem like they're endless mud. So I'm using the kayak to pick up. And when it's windy, it's hard. It's constant repositioning of your boat, and the mud motor doesn't help there. It doesn't. You're paddling for that part of it. Sure. So I tend to use smaller spreads and better concealment is what I try to do for that. If there's no wind, I got a lucky duck on a remote. A remote for me is a mandatory item if you're going to use any spinning wing decoy, because you want to be able to have the ability to turn it off and not have to go out there to turn it off. And I have a jerk rig as well. I mean, a jerk rig can be lethal when there's no wind.
Okay. All right. Zach Janey is asking, don't know if you covered this, but do you pull a sled?
I do not, because most of the time I'm using my mud motor, and that would pretty much cut any type of rope. I haven't found a good way to tow anything out there. You easily could.
Sure.
I know quite a few people, rather than tow a sled, tow a cheap kayak behind them instead, because it actually tows way better than a sled.
That's what I can use a flint for. Just tow my decoys. Another kayak to the fleet. Thanks, boys. Appreciate it. No, that's cool. Yeah, I like the smaller spreads. Like, I've done the big spreads with you before. Like that first hunt, I think we had, it had to be 6 dozen decoys.
Probably.
You know what I mean? But that smaller spread, hunting over a dozen decoys, like, I had a conversation with Matt Gibson once, and he's like, man, I've shot just as many birds over a dozen decoys with no calling as I have over, 10 dozen out of a boat. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And it's all about that location. And again, like you mentioned, like consistently scouting. The season never ends. You got to continue scouting, finding new spots, things like that. So
yeah, scouting is key. I mean, you got to be where birds want to be, and that can change throughout the season depending on temperatures, especially when things start to ice up. That's when things really can get good, in my opinion, because now it eliminates water. But if there's still food and open water, the birds aren't going to leave.
Yeah.
They might jump a really hard, strong north wind, right? I mean, you always run that risk. But if the water starts to ice, if you get skim ice and you don't have that hard north push, and there's still corn and there's still feed and some winter wheat and anything else in fields around here, they're going to stay. And that just narrowed the population to where they're going to be. And if those are areas, especially now, a lot of times it's those smaller rivers, it's those smaller creeks and that still have flow, which stay open, which are perfect for the kayaks, that you can use these smaller decoy spreads because you don't need a large spread at this point because you're already where the birds want to be. You just want to give them a little confidence. And less is more, in my opinion, in those situations.
Sure.
That's where the kayak really shines.
Nice. I like it. Ron Stem says, we do a large one jet sled loaded with a dozen full body Canadian geese. Does fine sometime.
Nice.
Dig it. Upland hunting, man. So give me the skinny, because I haven't done this one with you, but I know we've talked about it. So act like we've never talked about it. You know, like
so, Wisconsin. I mean, I'm a big grouse hunter. Grouse and woodcock are the two main species I pursue upland. I don't do a lot of pheasant hunting. And really when it comes down to it's the woodcock, and you're able to access areas with a kayak that you can't get to by foot, or access the back side of an area where by the time you would get there, your dog would be burned out. So I'll use a kayak to hunt like islands on rivers for woodcock. I'll use a kayak to get to different areas that, like, there's some public land I hunt with using a kayak that's landlocked. Well, not landlocked, but it's open on the water side, but you can't get there from a road. So it opens up that entire area as well, which gets very little pressure. So
yeah, it's cool. And like, you know, it's the same thing that we talked about with Parker McDonald. You know, utilizing a kayak on public water to get to public hunting lands to get to deer.
Right.
You know, you're taking that less pressured approach, which sometimes is the winning ticket, so to speak. There's a woodcock for anybody that isn't
the good old timber doodle.
Yeah, timber doodle. I love it.
But they're a great little bird. That's by far. That's probably my favorite bird to hunt. I just love hunting. I love hunting the woodcock, and there's many reasons for it too. I like the terrain that it's in. It's in kind of moist soil. I follow a lot of creeks and riverbeds, and like just off of the edge of it, and we cover a lot of ground. They hold so well for the dog. I mean, especially running a pointing dog. I mean, I've got some phenomenal pictures of the dog on point, and you can see the bird, and the bird's like, and they're in this standoff. And they're like, who's going to flinch first?
Sure.
So they just allow for amazing dog work. I also love the fact they're migratory. So you're kind of always, when's the flight going to come? Are you going to miss? Like, it's kind of like duck hunting in that sense that you're not scouting, but I'm kind of always like running the dog here and there to see when the birds are going to be in. And if you hit that flight, it's like lights out. It's just amazing. I think the best day I've had was 29 flushes in an hour and a half.
That's cool. Well, I know you're a big proponent for, hunting with the dog, which is super cool, man. Like, the first time I ever hunted behind a dog was with you, and it's a very unique experience for sure. If you've never done it, here's my first woodcock hunt. I actually got one. That's Brad's dog there. But definitely something different. But going back to the conversation before, utilizing that new canoe to transport yourself, your dog, getting into tucked back areas that most hunters don't get to.
Right. It opens up a completely new opportunity and window, especially for woodcock, because like I said, they like moist soil. So you can come in from rivers to these big public areas that have that off the river. But it could be a mile walk or a 2-mile walk in from the closest access point, where now you can get in, you can walk 10 to 20 yards in, and you can start working that entire river edge up and down. Just leave the kayak. I mean, I just lock it to a tree. If I even lock it to a tree, because half the time I won't see anybody out there anyways.
Yeah, sure.
But then you can start working these high productive areas where the birds actually are and that haven't been pressured. So it actually works even better because now they hold even tighter.
Yeah, right. Super cool, man. It's I don't know, man. I'm just so blown away. Like, I had never thought about using a kayak to hunt until a couple of years ago, and getting to know guys like yourself, Parker, Brody Swisher, guys like that. It's pretty cool, man. It's different. I watch the hunting public guys on YouTube, and they're utilizing kayaks and canoes and things like that to get into these back public spots. And, we've talked about that, especially for deer hunting, as, bow season's open, rifle season later in the year, the exact scenario you're talking about. A lot of guys park up on these roads and then they push into the woods. Well, if you can come in from the backside, now they're just pushing all the deer to you. So it's a whole different tactic,
Right.
Another tool in the shed or toolbox that you can pull out and utilize it at any given point in time.
Exactly. Plus, it also, like, for deer hunting, it gives you another really big advantage. So if you want to go work those swamp edges, right, and you can get into them from the water and walk, I don't know, let's say 50 or 100 yards, right? Or if you have to walk 500 to 1,000 yards, what would you rather drag your deer? Would you rather drag your deer 50 yards to your kayak and paddle it out, which is really relatively extremely easy, actually, if you think about it?
Yeah.
Or would you rather hook it to a harness and hump it out 100 or 1,000 yards? Over logs, over down trees, under down trees, up terrain, down terrain. I mean, it's never just this flat level cornfield you're pulling through. That's not public land.
Yeah, no, it's never easy. And I saw our good friend Parker McDonald just his luck down in Alabama, I believe it was.
I saw that.
Shot a nice doe in the front of his, put it in the front of his Frontier 12. Let me share this up. So, and that's the thing too, the weight capacity in a new canoe. I mean, you're never going to exceed it with a deer and yourself and all your gear in there, which is super slick. Sorry, Parker, I didn't like your post there, buddy. I just did. So, but super cool, man. I mean, Parker, shout out to him. He's got a YouTube channel at Southern Ground Hunting. Check that out. He's got a lot of videos where he's utilizing that kayak and kind of walks through it. Plus, we did previous podcasts with him where he talks about it, how he utilizes the kayak to get into some of these public areas. And I even, know some guys that have used it to get in private land areas too,
Right. You can, I mean,
creek running through there, lake, something like that. It's just another tool. Go ahead.
Right.
What were you going to say?
But that's exactly it. I mean, the same principle applies if you have your own private land with water access.
Sure.
You can come in from a different, and especially if you use the wind properly, right? If you have the wind in your face, like I always like the wind in my face when I'm deer hunting because I want to have the deer come from in front of me normally, because that's just what I like to do. Anyways, but if you're coming in from the water and you got that wind pushing into you the whole time, your scent's over water. And then the deer, a lot of times you'll have like these really nice trails that work that water edge just off the edge of the water. Well, now you can sit in between the water and those deer trails. Your scent is dispersed over the water. You didn't drag any human scent in through walking into these spots. You've come in as literally as clean as possible.
Yeah.
And when we're talking high pressure public areas where these deer get a lot of human scent and not, well, actually, I take that back. High pressure public areas, I seem like scent isn't as big of a deal. They're more used to human scent. It's like the north woods of Wisconsin that I've hunted for years, where there aren't a lot of people in them. There's a handful of grouse hunters and there's a handful of bow hunters, but them deer are scent, like they don't see human scent a lot. They don't smell it a lot, and they win something, they are gone real quick. So, I mean, in areas up there, it's even more like when you don't have high pressure and you don't have a lot of human scent. If you're not in urban areas, if you're in these big swamps or marshes or hardwoods where there isn't that constant human scent around to kind of like desensitize them, coming in from the water is huge.
Tim Jr. is asking, any resources I could use to find duck geese hunting near the border of Wisconsin and Illinois? I can tell you in Illinois, your resources are limited. There aren't very many spots unless it's private land and you have access from the homeowner. Wisconsin, on the other hand, I'll let you speak on that, Brad. Tons of public land, tons of spots.
Onyx is a great tool to use. Wisconsin actually has an app. It is called Hunt Wild Wisconsin, which will show you all the public land, and it's free. It's actually a really, really useful app. But really what it comes down to is finding that public land and then going to scout it. I mean, especially if we're talking for ducks and geese, you just got to drive around and find the birds. You got to put time on the water. You got to put time in your truck, time in your car, a lot of glassing with binoculars. You're going to be looking for where the birds are traveling, where they're feeding, where they're roosting, trying to set up either if you can get where they're feeding, awesome. I try to never shoot up a roost because I don't want to push the birds out of an area. So I try to let them set up in some sort of a run traffic line in between where they want to be and be like, hey, why don't you stop here for a second type of deal. I always try to avoid shooting up a roost when I can.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, Saturday I drove around for 4 hours, I think, scouting public land, waterways, looking for, ducks and geese and, found a little honey hole. Tim Jr., shoot me a message, man. I'll turn you on to a couple spots that I've been watching that are right on that Illinois-Wisconsin border. But I think, most Department of Natural Resources have a lot of, maps or listings of public areas, what you can hunt there, what you can't hunt there. So if you're new to that whole game, check in on your Department of Natural Resources websites, find listings, check, here in Illinois, a lot of the public land, you have to draw a lottery system because the public land's so limited. They're worried about X amount of people being on the same body of water and somebody getting shot, right? So they take that precaution and they do lottery drawn permits. Wisconsin's got way more public land than Illinois. And I know we're kind of talking specific to the Midwest right now, but I know down in Tennessee, there's tons of public land all over down there on, waterways for waterfowl and things like that. So just check with your state's Department of Natural Resources. You could even call a conservation officer. 9 times out of 10, they'll be more than happy to give you that info because they'd rather give you that info so you're doing the right thing versus having to waste their time writing you a ticket and, turning you away from the sport of hunting, So that's my 2 cents.
One thing I do throughout the entire season when my work schedule allows it, my work schedule can vary from time to time. If I can be out at sunrise overlooking water to see what birds are doing, I'll be there.
Mm-hmm.
Or after work, if I can get there and watch what birds are doing when they're leaving to go back to their roost and try to figure out where they're feeding. I scout as much during the week or try to that I can. So on the weekends I can hunt. And even if you go and you pick a marsh, right? And you park where it gives you a halfway decent vantage point and all you get is the first 30 to 40 minutes, that's going to give you a really good idea of where the birds are working and dropping in. I'm like, if you can go from the road, see, oh man, all these birds are dropping in behind this tree line over here. What's over there? Well, can you drive to it? If you can't, well, now you might have to get in the water to figure it out. But if you can plot a route even beforehand and not necessarily get there,
sure,
I would be willing to roll the dice on a weekend and get as close to if I can't get there, get as close as I possibly can because I know the birds want to be there.
Sure. Great info, man. Great info. Well, we're winding down here, my man. Why don't you let the good folks, Tim said, thank you, good info. Why don't you let the good folks at home know where they can follow you, catch your podcast, all that good stuff, man?
Well, I'm part of the Paddle and Fin Network. I host the Feather and Fur Show. It's a bi-weekly show on Saturdays, and I pretty much stay hunting specific. I haven't actually wavered at all from hunting. It is more of an all outdoors podcast, but it's really stayed hunting focused. We talk deer hunting, we talk bird hunting. I've had some great episodes, but for dog training specifically, and that's going to be a topic I continue to talk on. So all those guys out there that are training duck dogs or upland dogs or anything like that, there's some really great information on different clubs you can go to and things like that. So that's bi-weekly, Feather and Fur, Paddle and Fin Network. Instagram, it's WI_fishing_hunting. Facebook, it's Brad Hurlebaus Outdoors. No YouTube channel or anything like that. I don't have the time. I'll admit it. I just don't have the time to get into the video. I would love to do it. And I look at it and I look at what Parker does with Southern Ground. I mean, it's just I'd love it. Like, it's just, that's amazing. And that artistic talent. Then I also look at myself like, I ain't got that kind of talent.
It's a grind, man. It's a grind. That is for sure. That is for sure. Well, check out Brad's Instagram. He's always posting hunting reels and things like that on Instagram. It's cool to follow him. There may or may not be a funny video out there of me hunting with Brad and me possibly falling asleep and being woken up to a loud bang. Just saying. Everybody out there, if you tuned in late, you could always go back, watch on Facebook, YouTube. This will get uploaded to all the major podcast platforms. You can just search New Canoes Unlimited. We're here every Tuesday evening, 7 Central, 8 Eastern, 5 o'clock out on the West Coast. Just talking all things New Canoe, talking to Team New Canoe members like Brad, some of our dealers. We're updating products, things like that, and all the shows. So, if you guys have any questions and any shows or later on after you've gone back and watched, feel free to drop them in the comments. I always try to go back and try to answer comments where I see them fit. And we will see you guys next week. As always, boys and girls, tight lines, smooth paddle. Peace.